Fans of the Horus Heresy and Warhammer 40,000, thank you very much for joining me for a model, build and tactics review of the Mechanicum Cerastus Knight Atrapos by Forge World. So this is a model I've owned for a long time. It's kind of like being on my list of exciting things to review for quite a while. And quite a few people in the comments section have asked if I could do a review. I'm doing this following a conversation with a long-time subscriber and commenter, Jan Gunnar from Norway. Jan is getting one of these soon. He was asking for advice about building it. So I thought, and given all the other people have asked for a review, I thought it was about time to do it. So let's do it. So what I'm going to do in this review is I'm going to talk about the model, the kit, the quality. I'm then going to talk about the build. This is a complete resin kit by Forge World. Do some size comparisons, and then finally I will finish up by talking about the tactics both for 7th edition and 8th edition Warhammer 40,000. So that's the plan. So let's start off by looking at this model a bit closer. So as you can see, this is an enormous model and I can't get it all in camera shot, so we will look at it in bits. Let's start with a little bit of a rotation. Background. So the Mechanicum Knight Atrapos is a full resin kit by Forge World, and it is the most recently released variant of their Cerastus Knight chassis. And the Cerastus Knight is a, shall we say, a taller, leaner and meaner Knight chassis to the standard Imperial Knight Games Workshop produced in plastic a few years ago. And just looking around this straight off, we can see that this is it's a great looking model. It's a fantastic looking miniature, it really is. And one of the wonderful things about these Cerastus Knights, all of them, and this one is no exception, is the excellent poseability that comes with the model. The only real problem with the Imperial Knight model that Games Workshop does is the fact that you have monopose legs. You can, with quite a lot of conversion work, you can repose them. It's not a straightforward job. By comparison, the legs, well, everything on the Atrapos is poseable. And we can see here this, I've exploited to the full the gait of this model to have it loping forward, as we can see. I guess first thing, great poseability. So let's have a look at some of the details up close. The Atrapos is a Mechanicum specific variant of the Cerastus chassis. It's a suitably Mechanicum looking head, and I really like the head of this one. This is, I think, in terms of all the stock Knight heads, this is my favourite of the lot, and it's got some great detailing on it. The only other Knight head that I like anything near as much as this is the Knight Megaera head. Off the bat, Forge World did a fantastic job with this head, and if you bought this Knight, unless you were going for a second or more and you want a variety, I wouldn't replace this head with any of the variant heads they've done. This is, for me, this is the best looking one. Right, it's got two very distinctive, interesting and fantastically modelled weapon. So the first weapon is this fantastical looking device, and this is the Graviton Singularity cannon. So there you go, it sounds suitably esoteric and arcane and super high tech from the Mechanicum, and it's got these almost like petals. Now these are all separate and you can model them either closed or completely open, so that's a great feature. And you've got full detailing inside the petals, shall we say, and then the weapon barrel should you choose to have it open. So that looks a brilliant touch, that is. I love it. And you've got lots of recognizable design cues for Graviton weapons, lots of heavier cabling, so yeah, excellent. But it's all contained, so there's no power attachment points to the torso, so that makes the weapon really poseable. Lots of standard Cerastus Knight design cues we see with all of the assemblies under here. Same with the legs. We've got this really nice pipework, perspective view, and detailing. Poseable pistons, and on the legs we've got this articulated ankle with 4 separate pistons. There's a fourth one just behind this armoured plate there, and then an articulated knee. The hips are articulated as well, as is the waist. So you can really blow yourself away on the poseability of this, and I've seen lots of great pictures of this thing posed. And then the toes are poseable as well, as you can see from how I've modelled this leg here. Unlike the other Cerastus Knights, this Knight has got additional armour modelled on to its body and its legs, and that reflects through in its stats because this is the toughest of all the Cerastus Knights. And you've got lots of Mechanicum cog tooth designs. You've got this large cog on its chest plate. On the upper carapace, we've got cog tooth design on these pauldrons. And then this whole thing has got a beetle-like look, shall we say, And this is a design cue that's familiar to other Mechanicum Knights and units, as we will come to see. Then we've got all the reactor detailing, Mechanicum badge with the skull on the back, very nice. 2 enormous gyros for maintaining stability. And then the second weapon that this is armed with is this fearsome looking device. And this is a las cutter, well, an Atrapos grade las cutter, and it's a big weapon. And it's got some, if you've got a las cutter from the Horus Heresy era infantry, so for example Breacher Marines, you will probably recognise where the design of this came from, although this one is utterly enormous by comparison. Just like the Graviton Singularity cannon, beautifully detailed. Now I assembled all this, and I'm sure when I come to paint this I'm going to pay a bit of a price for that, because I'm going to have to paint behind these armour panels, so, well, never mind. I'll just have to work around that. I'll get there. I guess if you wanted to make your painting easy, you could leave all the armour off and then stick it on afterwards. But I mean, I will paint this and it'll be fine. It'll just take me a bit more time using an airbrush to get all these areas that are hidden away. But an absolutely stunning looking model, and this is one of my favourites in my collection. In looks wise, at the moment, it's probably my favourite walker, and it's just so purposeful and dynamic. I spent a lot of time working out the pose on this. I always do with my walkers from Forge World, be it Dreadnoughts, Titans or whatever. In the end, I decided on this sort of pose as if it had just fired its Graviton Singularity cannon and it was cooling down perhaps, and these petals are open, or perhaps getting ready to fire, and it was almost like it was striding forward with the las cutter raised up ready to strike against a similar sized Knight Titan target. I just love how it looks pose wise. I spent a long time working it out and just, yeah, getting it just how I wanted it. I really like the look of this model, and the fantastic poseability it has just adds to that effect as well. Right, so let's move on and talk about the kit quality in the build. Kit quality on this was excellent. I bought this as an early release model at one of the Forge World Open days. I think it was the same, I think it was mid-2015. It was the same open day when they released the Leviathan, because I had a very expensive day that day, because not only did I buy the Leviathan, I bought this guy. Although I did buy it a good time, so I got this limited edition Knight Scion standing figure. If you want an in the pack review of that, let me know in the comments. I'm not unboxing that because I'm saving that as a collector's piece. When I bought this, I can't remember how much it cost now. It might have been £165. I think they're 180 now. It might have been 170 when I bought it. So they're not cheap kits. It's about £50, £60 more expensive in a Forge World version of the Knight, or about double the cost of a Games Workshop plastic kit. You know, you got to make your own choice there. As an enthusiastic modeler of resin, a fan of the Mechanicum, and somebody who enjoys posing exciting walkers, for me this was a really worthwhile kit, and you know, I'm delighted I bought it. Kit quality, as an early release kit, it was excellent. No flaws whatsoever. It was absolutely perfect. So just what you always want to see from Forge World. Fair bit of cleanup to do on certain parts. It varied. I mean, most of it was pretty good cleanup wise. I mean, the biggest areas of cleanup were between these power capacitors on the Graviton cannon. I had to clean all the shims out between them, so that took a while to get it looking perfect, as you can see. I think the other big bit of cleanup to do was the las cutter and cleaning the mold seam off on the top and the bottom of this power coil here. That took a long time as well. I had to rebuild that little corner bit there because that got broken. I think there might have been another one because they got a bit broken off. They were a bit damaged when I took them off. But yeah, that was no big deal. Overall though, 10 out of 10 for the kit quality on this. It was really good, and it went together extremely well. There are a couple of additional parts. You get 2 banners. I didn't even wash these because I was pretty certain I wasn't going to use them. You can see these have still got the release agent on. I don't know what I'm going to use these for yet. I'm hanging on to them for the moment. To be honest, these are quite fragile to attach, so I wasn't in any hurry to attach them to the Knight. They need some very delicate pinning to secure, or perhaps, well, equally delicate magnetisation, but there are a whole host of places you could attach these on the Knight, and because they're resin, you can heat them up and bend them and they'll look great. So yeah, you do get those 2 as well. And so along with the Leviathan, this was one of the first kits to have the new style CAD version of the instructions. So it's going to be a bit out of shot, but yeah, so you get the parts inventory, and then a run through of the model build. The instructions on this were good. If you follow these, you won't have any issues, I don't think. Obviously, you know, you can use a bit of your own judgment with putting the torso together. An important note here, and it's well worth reading about posing it. They're quite right pointing out that if you do a very extreme pose on the Atrapos, the pistons on the ankles and hips and these power cables may not connect. And I had to do a little bit of cheating to get everything to fit this really big stride I put on it. This is right at the limit of what the model can do. So the build, let me think. The kit design is very good on this, I found. You basically build your legs and it goes up. You've got a lower leg, an upper leg, the hips or the waist, and then the torso. The torso is like a resin box, and then this part here sits on the top, and then you've got a frame and an attachment point for these arms. The arm attachment points are they're very finely modelled. They are quite delicate. I did a lot of pinning on this model, as you may not be surprised to hear. So let me tell you what I pinned. I pinned the ankles, I pinned the front and the rear toe. I did extra pins on this toe because it is in effect supporting the full weight of this rear leg. Pinned the knees, pinned the hips, pinned the waist. These have got some pins hidden away in there for attaching those onto the shoulder. This has got a pin and this has got a pin. So there's two reasons pinning is useful on a model like this. Firstly, is for the strength, but secondly, it makes it easier to test pose. So once you've got a pin in there, you need less tack to hold it all together. So there's an added benefit from doing the pinning on this model, I think. I used a fast setting epoxy resin glue to stick the ankles, the toes, the front and the rear toes, the knees, the hips and the waist, because there's a lot of weight on those. And I also used an epoxy to stick these cables on because I pinged them off after I'd super glued them, so they're a bit delicate. I then epoxied them and they were fine. A few other things, right, in terms of the stride, well, this is as far as it'll go. I cheated a little bit to get this cable to attach. You probably won't tell, but I had to cut the mounting point out a little bit to get it all to fit in. And I think I got away with these pistons. Sorry about the light. Whoops. Let's try again. There you go. Yeah, I think the pistons would this one was pretty far extended. I seem to remember that I actually used part of the casting gate I left it on the piston head or the piston arm to make the piston longer. It was a better fit, so that's something I did. These ankle pistons are extended as far as they go, and I did the same trick particularly with this one, and because that's really that's a bit overextended really, but yeah, I got it. And I just did a teensy bit of shaving on this leg plate just to get it to fit there at the rear. And that's just because it was a slight misjudgment on my part. I maybe spaced the legs maybe 1 or 2 millimeters wider than they could go. But it just shows with resin parts, you can easily just take a little bit away here and there to get it all to fit. Yeah, I mean, and I think with all resin kits like this, it's just a case of cleaning everything up and then taking your time with posing it, not rushing it, and using tack to test positions, using things. I mean, I don't know if I pulled a load of jam jars out the cupboards and sort of stacked them up around the model when I was trying to pose it. Tricks like that, just to test with the poses. And I think I spent a week or two building this, a couple of weeks building this. I very incrementally worked my pose out. This upper carapace needed a bit of heating up and to reposition it. I think that was the only bit that had any warping to it. And as well as it needed a little bit of sort of bending, I can't remember which way now, but I also needed to heat these exhausts up slightly and bend them to get, you can see how I've got an even gap around each exhaust to make it all lined up properly. And those exhaust stacks are separate parts to the torso. So yeah, another bit to watch out for there with posing. Now, there's an interesting point I want to touch on with this Atrapos kit, and it equally applies to all of the Cerastus kits. If you're lucky enough to be in the market for a Warlord Titan, but you perhaps are a little bit intimidated by the build, and you want something as a stepping stone to give you experience before you tackle the Warlord, these Cerastus Knight kits are an excellent candidate because they are built to almost exactly the same design principles as a Warlord. Now, forget about all the shoulder architecture and carapace weapons. When I say they're built to the same way, they've essentially got a lower leg, a foot with 4 toes, some pistons, some hips, and then a torso that's a resin box. And then you've got some carapace that goes on the top. And even the arms are a similar sort of arrangement. The actual shoulder mountings, there's a lot of similarities. So if you're looking for a kit as a stepping stone to assembling a Warlord, in my view, this is a kit to take, or any one of these Cerastus Knights, because it is like building a mini Warlord. And indeed, this was a precursor, all the Cerastus Knights were a precursor to the design concepts that went into the Warlord Titan. So yeah, that's an interesting consideration if you'd ever been wondering about that. I'm partway through assembling my Warlord. I certainly found the experience that I got through building this kit to be beneficial to take to the Warlord construction. Let's do some size comparisons. This is going to be quite hard when we get to the bigger stuff because this is an enormous model. Right, let's start with the small stuff, and I'm going to throw these on quite quickly. I'm going to put on a load of small stuff, then we'll go up a notch to some vehicles, and then I'm going to put some Titans on as well, one of which you won't be able to see because it's a Warlord, or the legs of it. Human. It's a Surgeon Medicae, Avis Joven of the Solar Auxilia, looking superbly detailed as always. And Avis Joven is now standing alongside the Atrapos. So these are very tall knights. And bear in mind, this is probably about an inch or two shorter than it would be at its full height because of how I've posed it. Let's swiftly move up the line to an Astartes. So here we've got a Medusan Immortal with a Graviton gun. I thought let's go Gravi because we've got Gravi guns over there, so we'll have a bit of a Gravi theme. Not much bigger. Let's go Marine again. This is a Hammer Bearer Gorgon Terminator. This is a conversion. This is a different head to what it comes with. And looking, as always, tough and mean. And cyborgy mean. And then one final infantry model, or a large infantry model, is a Mechanicum Talax. So this is a big beastie without a shadow of a doubt. Right, let's now do some comparisons against battle automata. First up is the trusty faithful Castellax. There you go, the do-it-all robot of the Mechanicum. This is small. It doesn't even reach the knee. So yeah, that's pretty small. And let's go for the biggest of the current automata that's available, the Thanatar. This is a standard chassis configuration with the plasma mortar, and that's a bit better size comparison really. And that's probably the top of them. The top of the head is about level with, well, I guess if both were stood up straight, then it wouldn't be the sort of the top of the carapace, or the head wouldn't be as tall as the top of the thighs. But taking the plasma mortar into account, it's pretty much reaches the waist of the Atrapos. So the Atrapos is very big. Let's do one slightly different comparison on the battle automata front. Here we have a Vultarax Stratos automata buzzing around in its crazy usual way. Just for giggles, I thought we'll put these two alongside. I thought it would be a funny one to stick alongside it with its Beatley style carapace, which mirrors the design on this, and I strongly suspect that some of this influenced the design on this. The body of the Vultarax is substantially smaller than the body of the Atrapos. Okay, it's bigger than battle automata, whether they be ground-based or air-based. Let's bring on a couple of the larger Astartes tanks. So firstly, we have a Land Raider armoured Proteus with a triple mount twin las cannon, or twin link las cannon I should probably say at the moment. It's about knee height, and it's about the same length actually. It's about the same length as this large base it's sat on. Then a Marine super heavy tank. So in terms of points, probably a pretty even match. We've got the Cerberus heavy tank destroyer, armed with its neutron laser array of doom. And this is a bit where, can we get them all in shot? Yeah, just about that'll do, won't it? So the Cerberus isn't really any higher, but it looks quite a bit bulkier and chunkier next to the Atrapos. And if we do the sort of length comparison thing again, and I'll just set you aside a moment. Looks quite big now compared against it. Obviously got a bit of perspective distortion there. So yeah, so that's Marine tanks. So these next comparisons, you can't see all the model because they're too tall. So firstly is a Warhound Mars pattern Titan. So this is our favourite Leakycheese channel mascot. You can see him looking a bit mean and formidable there. So the Atrapos, given these are both in a striding pose, the Atrapos is probably about waist height on the Warhound. Now obviously the Warhound's got quite a short torso. There you go. Oh gosh, just got it in. Yeah, as you can see how both are stooped down to a similar degree with how I've posed them. Interestingly, both got left foot forward. Quite intriguing that. You can't always have, well, you've either got to be left or right foot forward, so there's always going to be one, isn't there? But the Warhound is certainly quite a lot larger. It's probably about 20% taller, and as you can see, much, much bulkier. The Warhound is a far bulkier war machine than the Atrapos. The Atrapos is quite delicate and slim by comparison. That's the Mars Warhound Titan. And then finally, oh, hello, we've got a leg. And this is a leg of my part-built Warlord Mars pattern Titan. Now, so if we can just get the leg in the right place. So, now again, let's just look at the stridage on the Warlord, excuse me. So my Warlord is in a pretty wide striding pose. Again, that's about as maximum you can get out the kit. I like my walkers to be in striding dynamic poses. The Atrapos is, those are about at the same position. So it's about halfway up the thigh of the Warlord. Or to look at it another way, it doesn't quite reach sort of the groin area of the hip unit, if you will. It's small next to a Warlord, but not so small as not to be quite a cool companion. You can almost imagine these Cerastus Knights as being escorts to the large Warlords. I suppose in a similar way to what you have with the Warhounds, but you can imagine a number of these guys acting as flanking escorts. Quite like that idea. So they have some size comparisons, and I hope that range of models gives you a feel for how large these Cerastus Knights are. Okay, so now let's move on to talk about the rules. Because of the current 7th, 8th edition situation with the Horus Heresy, I'm going to cover both sets of rules. So this is going to be longer than normal for a rules section. I'm going to start with 7th edition and then we'll do 8th. For 7th edition, my rules reference is a Horus Heresy Book 6 Retribution. The Mechanicum Cerastus Knight Atrapos is a Lords of War choice for the Mechanicum army list. Costs 435 points. From the Knight selection and the smaller Lords of War, this is one of the more expensive choices. If you're thinking about a War Machine detachment, which allows you to take 2 super heavies with 8 or fewer hull points, this has 7 hull points, so it's one of those more expensive options. Let me run through its profile. It's weapon skill, ballistic skill 4, strength 10, front armor 13, side and rear 12, initiative 4, attacks 4, and hull points is 7. The unit type is a vehicle super heavy walker. Its war gear is 1 Graviton Singularity cannon, 1 Atrapos las cutter, an ionic flare shield, and blessed auto simulacra. Special rules are flank speed, household rank, when included in a Questoris Knight Crusade army only, super heavy walker, fear, hammer of wrath, invincible behemoth, move through cover, relentless smash, and strike down. Catastrophic destruction is another rule, and macro extinction targeting protocols. Gosh, what a lot. It only has one upgrade option, which is Ocular Augmentics at plus 10 points. As well as being a Lord of War choice, you are allowed to take 1 per 2,000 points in a Questoris Knight Crusade army list, and that reflects the rarity of this knight. It's often the case with these more potent and enhanced Mechanicum units, they are more limited in availability. Right, let's go through its special rules. Flank speed allows it to run 3d6 as opposed to a normal d6 move. The Ionic Flare Shield is a very potent defense. It gives a 4+ invulnerable save on front, left, right or rear, so you can only have it on 1 per turn. And that's a 4+ invulnerable save. However, it also has the same defensive capability as a Flare Shield. So direct shots have a -1 strength and any blast templates have a -2 strength. However, it doesn't affect destroyer or haywire attacks. This has got superior defensive capabilities compared to normal Questoris Knights. Right, macro extinction protocols means that any attacks against targets which are super heavy or gargantuan means that its weapons count as twin linked. This thing has been configured as a dedicated super heavy killer, and that'll become clear when we get to the weapons. Right, the catastrophic destruction rule, if it gets destroyed, you add +2 to the catastrophic damage table result. So there's quite a high chance that this thing is going to go up with a big bang, and that's because it's got a more powerful but less stable reactor, I believe. Let's talk about the weapons. So it only has 2 weapons, but they are very interesting weapons. The Atrapos las cutter has a shooting and a close combat mode. As a beam weapon, it has a range of 8 inches. Its strength is D and AP is 2, and it is a heavy 1 weapon. Most knight melee weapons don't have any shooting capability. Obviously some have inbuilt weapons, you know, such as like a irradiation cleanser or a heavy bolter, you know, to give a couple of examples. However, this one can actually be used at range and is a very powerful attack. And when you think about that combined with the macro extinction protocols, this thing can give something a good savaging with this at short range before it charges. In melee, the strength stays at D, but the AP becomes 1, and it has the Wrecker rule, and that allows you to reroll failed armor penetration rolls against immobile structures. You add 1 to any result you roll on the building damage chart, and if you do destroy terrain, you're supposed to remove it from play, as opposed to just saying you've got damage. So yeah, very powerful melee weapon, and unlike the majority of knight weapons, it has an AP of 1 in melee, so that just gives it that extra killer edge that most knights don't have. The other important thing to bear in mind with that is, unlike all the other Mechanicum knights, this one retains its high initiative stats. So the other 2 dedicated Mechanicum knights, the Megira and the Styrics, only have initiative 2. This is initiative 4 with 4 attacks. Finally, let's talk about its main ranged attack, which is a Graviton Singularity cannon. So this is an intriguing weapon. Range 36, strength 8 and AP 2. It's heavy 1, a large blast 5, armor bane, concussive, and it has a special rule called collapsing singularity. Straight off, with armor bane, this is a very potent long range anti-tank weapon. You know, equally deadly against heavy infantry like Terminators. It's going to kill them very easily with the AP 2 and strength 8. No feel no pain rolls under normal circumstances. And the concussive is a useful effect. You can lever onto a target before you charge in melee, so you have the initiative. Collapsing singularity. So the singularity cannon is also erratic and unpredictable, and every time you fire the weapon you have to roll a d6. On the 1 it suffers dangerous feedback from the cannon and it loses a hull point. You still get to fire, but you lose a hull point. However, if you roll a 6, then the attack gains a vortex special rule. Goodness me. With a bit of luck, you can pop vortexes into existence when you're shooting at things, and that, coupled with this, means this, unlike any other knight, this is a deadly knight killer and a super heavy killer. In the larger Apocalypse games, groups of these could certainly threaten the larger battle titans such as the Reaver and the Warlord because of their very potent weaponry. It has all the usual advantages of a Cerastus Knight chassis. I guess the flip side though is it's not very versatile against infantry. It's okay against heavy infantry, it's pretty good against tanks. I suppose it's excellent against monstrous creatures. Its most effective usage is against super heavy or gargantuan creatures. So, you know, I guess if you're fighting Tyranids or Squigoths in 40k, twin linking works very well. And I guess with 5 attacks on the charge with this thing, weapon skill 4, you can do a lot of wounds in melee with this fella as well. That's 7th edition. Moving on an edition, let's now go to 8th edition rules. For 8th edition rules, I'm referring to Imperial Armour Index Forces of the Astra Militarum. So let's start off by talking about its combat value. In terms of its power level, it's 29, so it's pretty expensive as a unit, and it's more expensive than the standard Cerastus chassis, which are 25. So yeah, 29 again. So the qualitative superiority of this unit shines through in its power level of 29. Points values wise, it's the same story. It's 555 points with all of its weapons. That's a base cost of 405, plus the las cutter at 80 and the singularity cannon at 70. So a costly unit. Let's look at its profile. It's strength 8, toughness 8, 27 wounds, 4 attacks, leadership 9, saving throws 3+. Its movement is 14, weapon skill and ballistic skill are 3+. Movement, weapon skill and ballistic skill decrease as damage is incurred. The Atrapos las cutter is range 9, heavy 1, strength is 12, AP is -4 and damage is 6. It has an ability. Attack with this weapon slays an enemy vehicle or monster in the shooting phase. You can immediately make another attack against a separate target within range. This bonus attack does not generate further attack, so it has like this beam effect, and that to me seems quite deadly. So you can in effect cut down 2 vehicle or monster type targets, or even, well, 1 vehicle or monster, and then have a shot at anything else, I guess. So that's pretty dangerous, particularly with that enormous strength, damage and AP. In melee, the strength goes up even higher to strength 14. AP stays at -4 and damage stays at 6. And you are allowed to reroll failed to hit and wound rolls against any target with the keyword of monster, building or vehicle. So you work that out. That's absolutely deadly against vehicles. And in my view, it's more effective in 8th edition than it is in 7th against vehicle targets. Right, the Graviton Singularity Cannon, again, has a range of 36. It is heavy 4, strength 8, -3 AP and a fixed damage value of 3. You roll a d6 each time you fire. On a 1, you suffer a mortal wound and the weapon still fires. On a 2 to a 5, you shoot as normal. On a 6, you get the vortex effect. And the weapon's attacks are carried out at strength 16, AP -4 and a damage of 6. So it's got that same sort of idea with the vortex effect as we had in 7th, and strength 16 and AP -4 and damage 6. That's kind of Titan grade firepower, full-size battle Titan grade firepower there. Very, very powerful. And then finally, for melee, it has Titanic Feat, which is strength as user, so it's strength 8, -2 AP and D3 damage, and you make 3 to hit rolls for each attack you make with its feat as opposed to 1. No shortage of attacks with 4 base attacks there. Right, a load of abilities. Blessed Auto Simulacra. If you've lost any wounds, you roll d6 at the start of a turn. 5+, you heal a wound. So that's a useful capability given the unpredictability of the Singularity Cannon. And because you only lose 1 wound now, you're less vulnerable to malfunctions with the Singularity Cannon in 8th than you were in 7th, because you only lose 1 wound and it's relatively easy to recover that wound on a 5+ each turn. It has its unstable reactor. If it's reduced to 0 wounds, you roll d6. On a 6, it explodes. Every unit within 2d6 inches suffers d6 mortal wounds, so watch out for bits of flying carapace. It has a flank speed rule, and this means when you make an advance roll, you roll 2d6 for the extra distance gained as opposed to 1d6. The Ionic Flare Shield, it gives a 4+ invulnerable save against shooting attacks and a 5+ invulnerable save against melee attacks, and we'll come back to that. It then has the rule Knight Titan. So this means that the Cerastus Knight Atrapos can fall back in the movement phase and still shoot and or charge in its turn. So this means it's very flexible as a melee combatant. If it's in a fight it doesn't like, you move back, you maybe shoot again and then go back in. So that's handy. You can move over infantry models, although you have to end your move 1 inch away from all enemy units. So that's handy. You can walk over your enemy troops or walk past them. Any infantry that are within 1 inch, you're allowed to shoot. So beware of this las cutter, beware of the Singularity Cannon, even if you're trying to melee attack this, because they will murder your infantry, and particularly heavy infantry, monstrous creatures and the like. They're going to do an awful lot of damage to you. It can move and fire heavy weapons without suffering any penalty to its hit rolls, and then it can only gain a cover save if at least half a model is obscured from the firer. And finally, macro extinction protocols means you add 1 to your hit rolls when you make shooting attacks against targets with a Titanic. So that means the Graviton Singularity Cannon is particularly effective against other Knight Titans and Scout and Battle Titans, so yes, beware. And finally, it has the faction keywords of Imperium, Questor Imperialis, Household, and then the keywords of Vehicle, Titanic, Cerastus Knight Atrapos. There you go. And that's the 8th edition rules. So what does that mean in terms of capability? It plays out just the same as it does in 7th, although arguably it's a bit better than it is in 7th. It's done very well in the hull points to wound stakes. One area now where this Atrapos Knight has a huge advantage over other Cerastus Knights and Imperial Knights is the fact that it has a 4+ invulnerable save against shooting attacks and a 5+ invulnerable save in melee attacks, and that really sets us apart. Most knights don't have any invulnerable save in melee, but this thing does, and that makes it much more survivable. The only other knight that has anything comparable would be the Ion Gauntlet Shield of the Cerastus Knight Lancer. The Questoris Knight Megara and Styx also have the same Ionic Flare Shield in 8th as this does. So yeah, exactly the same principle applies. It's great for killing Titans, good against heavy vehicles, It will also make short work of lots of monstrous creatures, and if you've got no better target, kill some heavy infantry or heroes, because all of its ranged weapons are going to kill even the tough heroes very easily. And it's got pretty impressive defensive stats, and also coupled with its fast speed means that you can get in and out of trouble easily, and you're more likely to be able to take advantage of cover. So yeah, I think it's a great unit in 8th as it is in 7th. So that's been a long review. There's been a lot to cover there. Spent a bit more time talking about the model because of obviously the comparison with the Warlord build. So I hope you found that interesting. I hope you found the whole review interesting. If you've got any thoughts or questions about the Atrapos, please share those in the comment section. I'll be very interested to hear. I don't know if anyone's got any experience of gaming this in 8th yet. I'll be interested to hear anything along those lines, or indeed other Cerastus Knights. Because I've got to admit, I have had my eye on the Cerastus Knight Lancer for a long time, and I keep umming and ahhing about buying one, but I've resisted so far because I've got so many models to do. That's the story of my hobbying. So I'd just like to finish up by saying thank you ever so much for watching. I'll speak to you next time, and goodbye.